Lisa with the Kat Scrappiness design team. I am so excited today. I want to share another project with you that I made, and it is this gorgeous rainbow card using the Everyday Brushstroke stamp set. And there is a couple of techniques on the card that I really love. I want to show you how I do them. The ink splatters on the back of the card. It's just a really fun technique, and it adds a lot of interest to any project that you're working with. So let me start by showing you the products that I used to make this card today. Of course, first up is the Everyday Brushstroke stamp set. And for this card, I used a repeating background with the largest brushstroke stamp at the top. And the next thing I used is these dies, the stitch postage stamp edge dies, and I used the largest size of the dies for the background of the card, and I used the second largest size to stamp the sentiment onto the front of the card, and then I heat embossed that with some white embossing powder to really make it pop. The other thing I used on this card is this cute little heart I used to frame the sentiment, and that was kind of an afterthought when I was making the card. I just wanted a little bit more color on that black sentiment. So this die by Concord and Ninth, it's called Quilted Heart Dies. The outer edge of the die cuts this really delicate little heart, and I just thought it was perfect to sit over this sentiment. The inside of the die cuts out a really pretty quilted heart, which I'm going to use on another project. So that's the inside of the die. But like I said, the outside made a really cool frame around the sentiment. The other thing that I used in my project on my card are these sparkling clear confetti from Kat's shop, and I just used them to kind of give a little bit of shine to the card. So I used the 4mm ones and the 6mm ones. And one more thing, if you notice on the card today, I actually stamped a fairly bright colored background, but I decided that since I was going to remake the card for the video, I would go with a little bit of a softer palette just to see if I like that look. So I used 4 colors of Distress Oxide ink. I used the Worn Lipstick, Spiced Marmalade, Fossilized Amber, and Cracked Pistachio. Actually, I'm going to use those colors on the card today. So we'll see how that looks. Since Easter's coming up, I thought it might be nice to make a kind of a softer pastel look to the background and see how that comes out. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I did was I took the large white background from the postage stamp dies, and there's the large brushstroke from the stamp set. And why don't we bring some paper in here to protect this pretty background. So the first thing I did was I started with the Worn Lipstick, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp the pattern across the card, going right down the card in kind of a rainbow order. The Worn Lipstick is going to substitute as my red, and then the Spiced Marmalade, Fossilized Amber, and Cracked Pistachio. So what I'm going to do is stamp out the background for you, but I will speed the video up so that we can save some time. And there's the background all stamped out, and you can see 2 of the spots that I stamped actually didn't stamp completely. There's a little bit of smudge in them, but what we can try to do is cover that up with the sentiment. I do like the Distress Oxide inks though. They tend to stamp really smooth, and normally you don't get those splotch marks. And usually I take a little bit more time and try to stamp it out smoothly, but for the sake of the video I was probably hurrying up a little bit. So the next step in the card is to add those paint splatters that I was telling you about. And what I do is I love to Sometimes I love to recycle, and I have these great cardboard pieces of cardboard that come out of the litter trays that I use for my cat's litter box, and they're absolutely the perfect tool to use to protect my work surface when I want to splatter paint on something. So I encourage you to look around your house and see if you can find something you can use to recycle in your craft room. I'm sure you all do it. We're very, very resourceful people, us crafty people. Anyway, so what I want to do is I want to keep the cat out of the video. That's what I want to do. But they seem to want to make an appearance every time I'm videoing. So what I do to make this paint splatter background is I take one of my acrylic blocks and I take just a teeny bit of black acrylic paint, but you can pretty much use any kind of black ink that you want. And I actually squeeze just a teeny bit out on my acrylic block. And then what I do is I take a little bit of water from a spray bottle and I just give it a couple of sprays to get it wet. Then I take a paintbrush. It's actually a fan brush. You can pretty much use any paintbrush that you want to use, but I find that the fan brushes make a nice splattered look. And I just rub the fan brush into the paint just to get it kind of thinned out. And then what I do is I grab anything nearby, a paintbrush or a pen, something that I can tap the fan brush against. And I always like to just test out the splatters before I start, just to make sure they're the intensity that I want. And basically, I just tap onto the paper against a pen, and I like that look. So I'm going to bring my project back over, get a little bit more paint on the fan brush, and I'm going to splatter my project. I can't tell you how much fun this is. You've got to try it. You will absolutely love it. For some reason, I always tend to get those big drops at the beginning and then very light splatters afterwards. So always trying to get those big splatters again in some other place. And today it worked, so I got lucky. One more over here and one more over there, and I think we're done. I have to say that is probably the most fun part of making this card. So I'm going to put the cardboard away. And the next thing I want to work on for the card, I took the smallest size die from the postage stamp dies and I stamped my sentiment. And when you're going to be using Versamark ink and then white heat embossing, you should use an embossing buddy to keep the embossing powder where you want it and not where you don't. But I always seem to forget that step for some reason. I don't know why. So then I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of white embossing powder over the sentiment. And then I usually keep a small paintbrush nearby just so I can get rid of the extra embossing powder where I don't want it, which I probably wouldn't have to do if I remember to use the embossing buddy. Oh well, always next time. So then I'm going to take that over to my heat tool and zap it, and there it is, all heat embossed. It looks so nice. And since I just can't get enough of that paint splattered look today, I'm going to splatter some white paint on the sentiment. Same process. My fan brush, this time a little bit of white acrylic paint. Might need to get that a little bit wet. You have to play with it and just see what consistency works best for you, but generally it needs to be a little looser so that you can get those paint splatters on your project. And once again, I'm going to test it out. That should be good. And there you go. So easy, so much fun. So then the next step is just to get that sentiment popped up on your card. And actually the size of the sentiment winds up being perfect because it's going to cover those two little spots that didn't get ink when I was making the background. So I'm going to take a little bit of foam tape the sentiment. Pop it up on the front of the card. And actually you can see that the paint splatters, the white paint splatters, are kind of light. I would have liked them to be a little bit more intense, but again, that just goes to show you that you really need to work with the consistency of the acrylic paint and just get it where you like it. But that's a pretty look. I like that too. To finish the card off, I use some sequins just to give a little more sparkle to the card. And the tool that I really like to use to put sequins on a card, I showed this in my last video. It's called the Crystal Katana, and this is a great tool because it just picks up the sequins so nicely and places them down on the card, and they actually stay where you put them, which sometimes is difficult with some of the tools I've used in the past. So I'm going to put one of my large sequins at the top. I don't know why this tool works perfectly when I am not videoing, but the minute I turn that camera on, it refuses to work. Small sequin here. One more over here. Well, now it's cooperating. I actually struggle with the placement of sequins when I'm making cards. I tend to fuss with them a lot, trying to get them where I think they should be or where I think they look pleasing. And I know the rule of thumb for placing sequins on a card is usually to try to get a triangular look, which for some reason, even when I try that, it doesn't always come out the way I like it. But I am cheating today because I fuss with these sequins when I made the card the first time. So I'm pretty much just copying what I did the first time. And it looks like I'm placing them right where I want them. So I think that placement looks good. And I like how it came out. The last step for the card, like I said, the first time I had made this card, I was looking at the card, and even though I liked it, this heart die cut was off to the side, and don't know what made me do it, but I placed it on the card around the sentiment, and I loved the way it looked. So get a little bit of adhesive on the heart in a few places, and I'm going to place it around my sentiment. And I have to say that was really just a happy accident that happened. I'm sure we've all had them. And that is the card for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you go and try some of that paint splattering. Find some cardboard around your house to paint splatter on. And my best piece of advice is keep your cats out of the craft room while you're videoing. Anyway, guys, that is my card for today. There's the original with the bright colors. There's the remake with the pastel colors. And actually, I really like them both. So thanks for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. You guys have a great day and get some crafting in. Bye-bye.